Thanks. I'm Amish Adalja, a senior scholar at the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security and a practicing infectious disease, critical care, and emergency medicine physician. I'll be co-moderating with Dr. Nicole Lurie, the director at the Coalition of Epidemic Preparedness Innovation US, CEPI. The session is going to focus on novel diagnostic strategies and tools during the COVID-19 pandemic. I think this is a really exciting topic because even before this pandemic, there was a lot of interest in trying to distribute testing and diagnostics outside of the traditional areas with influenza, with all kinds of other potential targets. However, it sort of had been stunted. We only had an HIV test, and there's a lot of benefits with antibiotic stewardship, optimization of antivirals, people knowing their status so they can change their behavior, and just knowing what people are sick with so that we have some baseline understanding of what's causing all these respiratory infections. So this is something really exciting, and I think that there's a lot of momentum in this space because COVID-19 catapulted many of these tests into people's houses, and we've got to kind of keep that momentum going. So in that vein, I want to move on to our panel now, and we're going to be hearing about three speakers. First, Dr. Rick Bright is the Chief Executive Officer of the Pandemic Prevention Institute at the Rockefeller Foundation. He will discuss the development and implementation of diagnostic tools outside of the clinical setting. Then Ms. Kathleen Weber, the Executive Vice President and Business Unit Leader for Molecular Solutions at OraSure Technologies, will describe lessons learned from at-home COVID-19 diagnostic tests. Lastly, Dr. Bill Rodriguez, the Chief Executive Officer at FIND, will provide an overview of implications for innovative diagnostics in global health emergencies. Their bios are available on the workshop website. Let's start with Dr. Bright's presentation.
Good afternoon, Amish. We have a slideshow. Someone will pop that up. All right, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here to discuss a topic that's been near and dear to my heart for more than a decade or so. The topic really is saving lives by reducing transmission and enabling early treatment in people who are empowered with diagnostics in the home and on the body. In the next slide, we wouldn't be here today if we didn't understand and see acutely now with SARS-CoV-2 the problem and recognize a huge issue we have in our healthcare system that I believe can be addressed by moving diagnostics closer to the patient and into the home. Maintaining diagnostics in centralized labs, as we have in the past, we know slows the ability to rapidly diagnose an infectious disease. It slows treatment, and that slowed treatment can often lead to inappropriate treatment that may increase the magnitude of your problem, including drug resistance, or even delayed treatment that can lead to more complicated outcomes such as sepsis and deaths. In my decades of working with influenza, I firmly believe that there was no need for an infected person to leave their home to get a diagnosis or treatment. And the influenza antiviral drugs that we have, we know work best when they're started within 2 days of symptoms. And very few people actually seek medical attention outside the home during that time frame. So we're seeing a lot of disease burden and mortality, morbidity, because we were not using diagnostics in an effective way to address the problem with influenza. On our next slide, so for my decade at BARDA, and I was the director for the last 4 years, I worked with our teams and with the private sector to incrementally move diagnostics closer to the patient, from large centralized labs to point of care needy settings to the point of need, meaning at the bedside, and with the goal ultimately of putting them into the home. And in BARDA, we have an opportunity, of course, to partner with many companies to achieve the goal. We partnered in, I think, 2015 with OraSure to develop a point-of-care test for Ebola, and you'll hear more about that today, I'm sure, from Kathleen. In 2017, we worked with Q and Diasys, which is now Lucira, to develop a molecular test for home use for influenza. And people thought that was truly crazy to even explore. But both companies have now authorized from the FDA authorization home test for SARS-CoV-2. Then 2018, to drive this vision even further and faster, we started a new division in BARDA called DRIVE, a division of research, innovation, and ventures. And our first program was called ENACT, a program for early notification to act, control, and treat. It was established to partner with companies to identify key markers for health status, to move diagnostic tests from clinical swabs and samples to wearables, with physiological biomarkers, and other things that we can combine to get even earlier signals that something is happening in that person, so they can either seek medical attention or change their behavior to reduce transmission and actually get a treatment on board sooner if needed. However, these remarkable technologies, we're facing a barrier still to getting them into the homes. So on the next slide, I've heard it sometimes takes a crisis to drive a paradigm shift. And if there is a silver lining from the tremendous impact on COVID-19, it is now we have a number of diagnostics in the home authorized for home use. We have the FDA has authorized a number of home-based therapeutics for molecular testing and home-based rapid antigen tests, so people can get tested early. They can use this information to change their behavior and not go to potentially expose someone who is vulnerable, or not go to a social event or travel if they're infected. Truly remarkable to see. Now, from the safety and comfort and privacy of your home, you have an opportunity to participate in response, to get early treatment, and change the curve of an ongoing pandemic. And this is now happening not just for SARS-CoV-2, but we are seeing advancements in driving this for influenza. There are home tests now for sexually transmitted infections such as HIV and chlamydia and syphilis. So the paradigm is moving in this direction. On the next slide, I'm going to dream just a bit more. Our next steps, though, are potentially powerful for continuous, personalized, and proactive health actions. We now have phone apps that can detect ear infections, as well as scanning to monitor the whites of your eyes to detect early signs of cancer or illness. We have various real-time sensory apps that are being deployed to monitor your health vital signs, to detect illnesses, including your blood saturation levels and oxygen saturation levels and glucose monitoring. We have disposable contact lenses that are monitoring for blood pressure. We have color changing tattoos that can detect biochemistry changes in your body that will drive and identify diverse types of, detect diverse types of infections and even radiation exposure in your body. And the next step that we need to take is starting to combine these together. You know, my concern of having just a SARS-CoV-2 rapid antigen test in the home is it's such a waste. If you take a swab, why not check for flu? Why not check for SARS? Why not check for RSV? You know, if a person doesn't have influenza, what do they have? And so I believe the next step in these home-based rapid antigen tests will be multiplexing. So one swab will do the job and inform you if you have RSV or SARS-CoV-2 or influenza or other respiratory pathogens. On the next slide, you know, my dream is always with bumpers around it in terms of challenges. You know, we're going to be generating more data. You know, how do you control this data? Where did the data go? My vision is the data are anonymized and de-identified and go into a larger database so we can look at a community level and a population level to understand when there's a status change or a baseline change in a community or population that goes beyond the individual level. But that's going to contain or have to be addressed by a number of different rules and governance strategies and data privacy and security. And then I would really like to see us tethering early diagnostics to treatments. You know, when someone gets a positive test, they should be automatically contacted so they can get that medical care and treatment that they need, and that therapeutics should already be on the way to their home so they don't have to leave the house and expose others or potentially be exposed to other things. Then we also have the regulatory pathways. The struggle we have today still is a regulatory pathway for developing or approving or authorizing a diagnostic and understanding the difference between a diagnostic and a screening test, and not how you compare the two, but the regulatory challenge, I believe, is how they complement each other and how we use them together in a society to understand what's happening in the population. At the same time, we can understand what's happening at an individual level for proper treatment. And then there's a huge challenge to incentivize developers in this place to continue doing more, and also to reimburse and pay for the value of those diagnostic tests, understanding their value not just being an inexpensive or low-cost dipstick, but what they save in our healthcare cost, what they save in terms of life and the burden of disease. And the last slide, slide 7, is a vision. It's about leveraging these technologies. And Dr. Laurie would tell you, I'm a visionary and I love the technology and seeing how it comes together. And I do believe that with the technologies we're seeing now, with the paradigm shifts we're seeing because of the COVID-19 pandemic and the challenges that we've broken through and barriers and using home diagnostics and moving them into the home that we have to face going forward, I believe we can have a future where we have people who are empowered with tools who play a larger role in their healthcare and emergency response, where people are empowered with early notifications and early information to get earlier treatment, where people are empowered with this knowledge so they can become a first responder in their home when their family is exposed to or infected by influenza or the next pandemic, whatever it might be. In turn, we have to transition this individual knowledge into a global network of information. That is how I think we connect individuals to the community, within countries, to the globe, and how we can become aware sooner of a new pathogen that might be spilling over from animal to humans or coming from nature somewhere. This connectivity between the individual and the world is a key, I believe, to an early warning system that will help us detect the pandemic and mitigate it sooner and make sure individuals are aware of it and are treated sooner to help control the spread of whatever it might be. So I will stop there on the high note of my vision and dream. Thank you for having me.